muvusam. Gemara says it. Rabbi brings it down the halacha. Men shouldn't go out all perfumey and fragranced. You know why? Rashi says they shouldn't appear like they're trying to attract their own gender. That's what Gemara says.
Is that
the implication being that if you wear that stuff, then you're trying to make yourself more attractive in the eyes of other men.
Is that
or in the nostrils?
Regarded opinion?
Wait, so if I'm wearing a good cologne, I'm attracting men?
Gemara says that's what people might get that impression.
But what if my girlfriend likes my cologne? You know?
Right. Can't speak to that.
What happens to my boyfriends?
Joel, you know why I can't speak to that?
Why?
Girlfriends are usher.
We're dating for marriage.
Boyfriend likes
it's fine.
What, Yehuda?
We're dating for marriage. It's fine.
Of course.
Exactly.
Of course.
Me and Yehuda here.
Well, I would think otherwise. Come on. We had a very nice sheer trip to Yafo, the old city of Yafo, earlier this morning, and it was great. Gorgeous day. Anybody been to Yafo?
I've had a lafa. Does that count?
Yeah. Well, okay, that's good. Hi, Ed.
I've been to Yafo. Does that count?
Nice, very nice. And I think I don't know how to prepare exactly when I guide derech. I usually get the impression that I speak way too much. I get that. I don't know why. It may be having something to do with the eyes going half-mast in most of my
Because we all have ADHD, Rabbi. So
I'm sorry, what?
We all have ADHD.
What?
We all have ADHD.
So quite unexpectedly, I started talking and they all listened. And then I, kept talking and they all kept listening. But I still try to do it. It's a really interesting place and there are great stories to be told there. But I did it, compactly. I don't think I skimmed, but I did it compactly. And I finished in a certain timely kind of fashion. And they said, "What? We want more." I said, "Oh, okay. I can do that." Finding more things to say has never been a particular difficult thing for me. That was great. It was great. They're really into it. I think one of the reasons Yafo is one of the places, a few places like this in Eretz HaKodesh, but it's one of the places where it's just it cuts such a swathe through all of history. We talked about the book of Yonah. We talked about the Maccabim. There are figures from the Gemara. They're modern day. Eichmann was held there when he first came to Eretz Yisrael. There's so many slices of life that put everything together and make you realize, wow, all this stuff is true. This whole, heritage stuff, the Jewish people and all of our history, it wasn't just like old fables. These are actual stories, and this is where a lot of them took place. Or at least, like Yafo was certainly one such place where a lot of them transpired. So, that's something that we know intellectually. When you go to a place, it makes it real. It brings it alive. You remember the line, I think I've quoted it here recently, where Volby says that you should try to do this. Oh, I know, I quoted it last time we met when I was encouraging you to not just hear the parsha of Matan Torah, but you should picture it. You should imagine yourself there in as much vivid detail as you could bring to the occasion. Did anybody have anything? Yeah, Shmuel, go ahead.
I was learning about that. I was reading Agudas Yisrael's halacha output for Shavuos, and it spoke about the halacha that some shuls. It was talking about first standing for the Sarasa Dibros, and how there's both a strong minhag for it and an opposition. The opposition being it kind of discounts the rest of the Torah.
Right.
And spoke about some shuls go as far as to say that they won't put up the Sarasa Dibros anywhere in the shul. And I gave a bunch of sources for it.
Well, because there were historically that happened that people. Hi, Ezra. That people sometimes formed whole religions around the Aseret Dibros exclusively. at the expense of like the whole God's Torah, you know that Rav Sadia Gaon has a famous commentary on the Chumash in which he explains how all Tariag mitzvahs are actually contained in the 10 mitzvahs. So that in fact they're not just, they're symbolic and they're inclusive of everything else. But if you just were to read them or stand for them, you might think otherwise. You might be misled and thought that, well, that's the whole Torah. Yeah. Great.
My question would be, it then said that for that reason, the depiction of it, they say that we shouldn't look at depictions in artwork of it. It said a story of someone who asked a gadol if they could put a picture, if they could paint a mural in their house of Har Sinai so that they could always remember and do that mitzvah. And it said it's not usher, and you're technically, according to the letter of the law, fulfilling the mitzvah, but it's not recommended because it'll then become your artist rendition in your mind, and it should be something that's constantly fluid for each person. What I was wondering is, does that, and it then added a caveat saying that the reason why there are kids' picture books is because they don't have the dots to try to picture it, so they need someone else, like an artist, to create the picture for them. But for adults, it's not a good idea. I was wondering, does that apply for the rest of Tanakh? Because I have a Navi book to read to kids, and I was wondering if looking at those pictures and images, if that creates an image in my mind of what that story was, as opposed to the text itself. Is that problematic, or is it just with Kriyas Yamsuf and Mamad Har Sinai?
I love the question. It's so interesting. Hi, Aviel. It's a thought-provoking question, and it's a familiar one, and we've been over it in many ways. So there is a tendency to trivialize and to distort the Tanakh, our tradition. We know that there's actually a prohibition of replicating the Klei Kodesh in the Beis HaMikdash or in the Mishkan. You can't make models of them, and the like. And part of it is related here because you fill in the blanks, and often you're filling it in incorrectly. And of course, part of the grandeur of learning Torah in an ongoing way is that you're always filling in details, so that your picture last year is incomplete this year, hopefully, if you're always growing in Torah, so then it's much fuller and richer and more interesting. But the minute you've committed it to an artistic version, you've frozen it. So that's implied by what you're saying on the negative side. The positive side is what I was referring to with Volby, though. If you can try, at least in your imagination where it's not frozen, you try to conjure up a detailed, specific kind of an image, it becomes more real to you. So I guess it's, you're juggling between two opposite problems, but you want to do somewhat. You want to go down that path to some degree, even though, I always say you can't make the movie version of the Tanakh because, it's ridiculous. Hollywood sensationalizes it and makes it all silly. Right? And Moses just does not, I refuse to believe, look like Charlton Heston. Is that a thing still, by the way?
Ten Commandments?
Yeah, especially in those 10 Commandments?
No, the new 10 Commandments is the Prince of Egypt.
Okay. And is that also, that's out of my vocabulary, is that also ridiculous or convincing?
Like chatzi.
Okay.
My brother just brought up an example when I was reading this to him at night. He said, I don't think God wants me to think of Val Kilmer when I'm thinking of Kriyas Yamsuf, and yet that's what the image that was placed in my mind from years ago when Steven Spielberg made this animated movie.
Because, like your question clearly implies, it trivializes it, it makes it a joke. The turning of these profound biblical narratives into fairy tales, or points for our amusement, which we know that the Tanakh, every last word in the Tanakh is layered and with all kinds of meaning. Pshat, Remez, Drash, Sod on immediate levels and on subtle Kabbalistic levels as well. So you freeze it in the Hollywood version, so then you've trivialized it.
Yeah, but then
That's
there's
certainly a
also
problem.
around Perm, you see there's the Perm Spiel Megillas that like they have like the pictures, like, but they, like they're done in a way that every little detail in there is like a different medrash, and it says at the back. Is that also a problem?
It runs in the same issue. If it makes it come alive for you, if it's more real and more tangible, good. If it trivializes it, bad. And these are nuanced kinds of distinctions. Not always clear when it's doing one or the other.
I had a random question actually, very directly related to this. I'm gonna take the opposing view. I just want to know what you think about it, because I don't know if it's only me, but there's some Ten Commandments scenes that I really, really do enjoy watching. It really does fill me with it's like the burning bush scene when I see I don't know what the actor's name is, but when he changes, like when his beard grows or so and so. I know obviously it's not exactly what happened, and you can't compare what happened to the Torah in a movie, but for me, I like that scene personally.
Well, maybe that's speaking to, I've come down decidedly mixed on this on this topic. It could be a virtue, and it could be a detriment. All of this sounds like in that case, it's doing for you what Revolbi wants it to do for you. Where it simply enhances your appreciation of it. You feel like more connected as a result.
Yeah,
but even when you do that, but always keep that caveat in the back of your mind, the front of your mind. Okay, that was great, and it touched me on, it touched a nerve emotionally. Great.
But it's not everything.
But there's a lot more, and that is a lozeh, as they say in Hebrew. It's not exactly precise.
Yeah, I agree.
That's all. But great, power to you. If it enriches the experience, wonderful. I thought for tonight, this is pretty topical, of the different topics we've been brainstorming, and I'm still up for requests. We would do the one that I hoped to give in yeshiva and didn't have the opportunity before you all took off and abandoned us. By the way, just by those of you who were here this year and went back, just by a quick consensus, I don't know if you're able to enable your video or to reappear on stream, Yehuda Roth. Gavi, I don't know if you're there, but just by a quick show of hands, do you now look back at leaving as a good thing or a necessary thing, or do you wish you'd stayed in yeshiva? Option one, raise hands. Option hands, do you think it was a good thing?
No,
Option two,
Rabbi,
you wish you stayed in yeshiva?
Rabbi, no. So it's hindsight is 2020. Like it
Right,
ended up being,
of course.
it ended up
Well, I'm
having a
asking
great
that.
time.
I'm asking that in hindsight. No, obviously, we can't do anything about it. I'm just curious, in retrospect, if that was a good thing or a bad thing. Who thinks it was a mistake to leave?
I
kind of wish I stayed.
All the guys who've stayed are gloating. They're like, oh, we did better. They all blew it. And they had a great time.
They could have very easily gone the other way. It could have very easily gone the other way.
Right, and you know what? I mean, it's every day with this corona thing. It raises new questions. Right now, there's been a spike in the cases in Eretz Yisrael, even after they opened everything up, and now there are more cases, almost predictably, because people are just being negligent and all kinds of things. And so there's a real question: should we send our kids? Should we not send our kids? And you have opposite impulses. Part of it is, we want our kids to get a good Torah education, but then do you want to stay safe? And which one is the proper avodas Hashem? And the poskim, some of them are coming down definitively. Rabbi Berkowitz has been developing he's consistent with what he's been saying. He says people shouldn't send, but a lot of poskim say you can, and maybe some say you should. Right.
For kids, isn't the threat just so
what the right course of action is? What?
For kids, the threat's like extremely low, as opposed to the elderly population.
So a couple thoughts. One, it's not just about immediate threat. The whole problem is a societal problem of spreading the thing. Kids transmit to parents and grandparents and barbershop owners and right. In other words, in fact, kids are our primary source of spreading the disease. So it's not just that they're endangering themselves. A couple of idiots. A couple of guys in Derech. Not that all the guys in Derech are idiots, but these guys were when they said it. They said, oh, well, I don't really care if I get it. It's not a big deal. I'm young. I'm healthy. I can deal. Well, they're fools because I looked at them and I said, so you don't care if you transmit it to somebody and kill them as a result? They said, oh, well, no, I mean, and then again, you should care that you get it, and kids should care because apparently nobody has any real definitive clue about this thing, and apparently it could leave residual scars, black marks on your lungs, all kinds of scary stuff with this. So I don't know if that's accurate. Plus, there's this rare disease that they've been tracking in kids that's related to corona that they don't really have a handle on it, but evidently it could be fatal for kids too. So when there's a magafo, and you have to err on the side of caution. Ben and Ari Swift, welcome. Hi, Shmuel. You had something?
Yeah, meaning for guys who are going back to yeshiva, why would there not be? Why shouldn't a person go? In other words, if it's not fatal to them, and the people it would be fatal to are already going to be exposed by having whatever place open, is that a reason to avoid going to yeshiva or to stay in?
No, it's just a reason to take precautions. That's all. Yeah, one should be safe. There's no end to, if you want to be, I can't imagine this is a particularly fun period for the OCD types out there. Because like there's just no end to the craziness that you could I remember when this first came out, I'm not OCD per se, but I remember thinking when you start to train yourself not to touch your face, which is extremely difficult, right? And then all these different like stray thoughts, well, what if I touch my mustache? I mean, that's not really my face. Come to your mind, and you could drive yourself batty like this. Hi, Yaakov Greenspan.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you?
Yeah, good. So like that. So I think my general advice to people is to err on the side of caution. Even if it's silly caution, what do you care? What do you have to lose? Put a stupid mask on. It's uncomfortable. Get used to it.
Yeah.
Right. And potentially you'll save people's lives by doing that. We're into life. Jewish
Rabbi,
people.
what do you think about all these riots?
What? What do I
All
think of
these
the riots?
looting, and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's very much a byproduct of the culture. If the culture, we've talked about this.
Hey,
before,
one second.
So it's a narcissistic, me first oriented culture, and if somebody, it's a culture thereby that in which victim status is a preferred status. If you can define yourself as a perceived victim of some societal collective wrong, then it gives you the podium, gives you the upper hand, and people celebrate that. They love being the victim, because in the case of the riots, it's a perfect illustration too, because it gives you,
And it's a good way to get
gives you complete moral license, and you have the moral high ground to go let your Yetzer Hara run amok and go loot, smash store windows and loot, all in the name of some kind of perceived victimization. I think that's a byproduct of society that places too great of an emphasis on the self. We talk about the need for communal responsibility and decency.
You're speaking out only against the looting, but you agree with the whole rioting, or like the whole protest?
Never okay to riot. No, it's never okay to riot, and you have no rights to protest in that way. Nobody does. Yeah. We're all here to be moral beings, to be self-restrained. And if you have a complaint, take up your complaint with a direct party that deserves to hear it, not with the world at large.
Yep.
But the culture today trains people to be angry at the world. It's the same mentality that encourages high school shootings, or random people pull up to random shopping malls and go on shooting sprees, because the perceived victimhood then leads people to blame everybody. The world's responsible. They all deserve to die, kind of mentality. Right? That's a societal ill. There's something deeply wrong, and it's all interrelated with such a society. American society is a deeply flawed one. It's as Rav Moshe Feinstein calls it, it's the Malchus Shel Chesed. It's the kingdom of kindness that's been very good to the Jews. It's also been a disaster for the Jews because it was too good to the Jews. So we always emphasize the intermarriage and the assimilation. But it was very kind to us, so we should be grateful for it. But I don't think anybody should get too engrossed with America or have too ambitious, optimistic expectations of what's going to come out of America. It doesn't look very promising. I mean, that they could elect a person of the moral nature of the current president. For whatever your politics are, left wing, right wing, he's better for Israel, he's not better for Israel. Just his character reflects not positively on the society at large.
There are some good beliefs, though, like Puritan beliefs that the U.S. is based on. Isn't that better than most countries?
Absolutely. It's a mix. My only point was in the grand scheme of things. Look, we never place our hopes in the Goyim. That's not the Jewish way, and a lot of people have in America. A lot of Jews, even so-called Orthodox Jews, really believe America's it. Democracy's the way. They're all into democracy. Well, these are deeply flawed systems. Remember Churchill's line in Democracy? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the other forms. Right? But the people who hold like democracy almost like a religious value. They're wrong. They're wrong. And America is not an embodiment of utopia. It's not our end game to be in America, and that's not just geographically. That the culture is one that's deeply flawed, and a person who's smart and committed to Hashem should take a very long, hard look at himself and his own values when he's too engrossed in the American way of life. Good. I was going to talk about, I don't mind doing this. We could go freestyle if you prefer, but in the interest of trying to be a little productive as well, I thought we'd say arrive at 10-point series or class or unit on how to stay stark under challenging circumstances, how to be strong, and whatever your convictions are, and wherever you're holding religiously, how do you endure that? And I give it, not every year, but I give it, informally, formally, I give it as a talk. I hoped to do it this year, and then Corona happened, and I didn't have time. But it's something that you need and we all need this because we learn a bunch of great things in the course of our lives. We usually have lofty ambitions and ideals and goals that we set for ourselves, and then this life thing happens that throws us off. So how do you navigate that? That's the topic for tonight. Good? Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Here we go. 10 points in staying stark. First step, this is a big one too. It's really helpful to get this. Realize you're entering a danger zone. And the problem is people are blindsided. They go into vacation or like what I imagine is the reality for a lot of people. You're in your room for extended period of time. You're in your house for a long period of time. There's no structure. No structure is what the Yetzer Hara loves, because then he moves in and takes over. That's danger. All of our worst qualities come out, and a few more that we never realized were there. So the first step is to realize you're in the danger zone, and then to combat that is make a plan. Meaning, if the danger zone is lack of structure, everything's hefker, so the great response to that is sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila, right? The best of our actions is when you give it some forethought, is make a plan. Now, I guess it's a little late my telling you this now, but it's never too late, really. Make a plan. Somebody on the tour today is a little bit at loose ends with what with where he is holding his life. He's not a disciplined person, not a structured person. So I recognize it's going to be a little tricky for people, but he's looking for an internship, looking for an apprenticeship, a school maybe during the summer. So I wish I had what to tell you. I don't know what to say. There's not much out and available. Very talented people who are primary breadwinners in their families are out of work. And so for younger people your age, I'm sure some of you have jobs, but I'm sure they're also very hard to come by. So finding meaningful activities and parnasa and such under these circumstances It's very hard, but in our grasp, we can do it. And it means a certain amount of forethought and work, right? Just like if you realize you are entering a risky situation, let's say you're entering, a building whose foundation is not so strong, and you go there for some vital purpose, you're going to save some kids on the 4th floor. You'd enter, but you'd take every precaution necessary. You would think about, okay, 3rd floor, there's a shaky staircase, right? And you would then anticipate every pitfall. You would play through any number of different possible scenarios. Okay, this could get me if I'm not careful. And then you'd be on the alert at every step of the game, right? So this is particularly true, and it's a little deceptive because you're in a comfortable environment, you're in your home, you have your routine. Doesn't mean it's any less dangerous. In many ways, we're seduced by the simplicity and the easiness of it all. We just fall into this kind of passive acceptance of a reality. But it's tragic because we waste our lives, we waste ourselves. People can get lost. The endless loop of the video game. No, people do now. What you help me here? You'll make it more contemporary for me. What do
Yeah,
people
it's always
do
one more game. End up passing up. We have to do.
Say it again, y'all.
So it's one more game, and then you get stuck in that loop of playing the video games until what you have to do is pass.
And do people have this experience of looking up and saying, "Wait, that's so weird. How did 4 hours suddenly pass?"
Yep.
What a tragedy.
Especially in VR.
What?
Especially in VR systems, virtual
reality.
reality.
VR?
Very few people have VR systems, Eitan. Let's be realistic.
That's fair.
What is it?
Virtual reality.
Yeah.
Basically, glasses.
Yeah. Oh, that's with the video games where you enter a certain, and it really is tangibly feels real.
A little bit, yeah.
Basically, you strap a screen to your face. And it has things, it's like 3D and you can look around.
That's more so than playing any standard run-of-the-mill video game that you can get sucked in and lose
your eyes
whole
after
days.
a while, though.
It's a total immersive experience.
I feel like it hurts my eyes after a while, though, personally.
I'm sure they have ways of getting around that.
They're working on it.
Yeah. Yeah, the key here, I'll finish the first of the issues, is that really the key is that you stay in charge. Be aware that the Yetzer wants to find scenarios where it takes over. It controls your life. There is one of the classic ways it gets us is through a phenomenon that's got to be familiar to a bunch of us here, and that is something called Yeush. And we have a good pithy definition of Yeush. Yeush is giving up, despairing.
Giving up.
Despair, yeah. So what happens is if you follow this is going to resonate if you've never heard this before. I'm sure it's going to sound familiar. It's the beginning of depression for many, many people. Is the Yetzer somehow convinces you that it's all pointless. Don't even bother. I mean, you've been through this so many times before. You've failed so many times already. Who do you think you are? What do you think you can accomplish? Give it up. Kind of defeatist voices. These are kind of the voices that come into our mind. And then you do. You give in to those voices. You say, yeah, it's really hopeless. Or the voice of anger at Hashem or at society. I mean, that's where these riots are coming, right? Where I'm angry. I've got a chip on my shoulder. That's also an invitation for the Yetzer to take over, right? So if you recognize that you are in charge and it's an obligation, it's vital that you stay in charge, that you establish life with structure, you have rules, you have policies. The other 10 steps that I have, we'll be spelling out how to do this in hopefully some concrete ways, but you're in charge. And accept that and own responsibility. And you can't go to Olam Haba and have to answer yourself and say, well, I don't know, I was lulled into it. And suddenly, but when I wasn't looking at it, I became addicted. And you put it in the passive tense as if you weren't responsible. But at one point, it was a choice. Before the addiction took over, the person made some kind of conscious choice to fall into it. Well, okay, we're supposed to be in control of that. Number 2, another trick of the Yetzer Hara, it loves spontaneity. And as we said before, it hates structure. So the Yetzer gets you when you're not looking. If you're not navigating and trying to, every step of the way, so the Yetzer will get you. I mean, the best illustration, people talk about this when they're doing something totally innocent or even noble, looking up a good Torah shiur online, and suddenly, hey, how did I click to this site suddenly? Where'd this come from? Well, just on an impulse. You saw something, and of course, I don't even understand how it works, but the algorithms the advertisements is they say, just click here, and you click here, and it's just, everything is open to you that you shouldn't be looking at, right? So that's the spontaneity. The filters are not perfect. And some of you are really clever with these things. You could put in a filter on your phone, in your computer, only to circumnavigate it. You can just get it out of the way. But the reason why the filters, even when you can get around them, are still a good idea is because they deal with this spontaneity. They help you because in order to get around them, it requires 1, 2, or 3 steps. And already then, in order to go through those motions, you have to use your conscious mind. Wait, am I doing this? No, I'm not going to do this. And then you stop. The Yetzer Hara would like it where you don't think at all. You just passively go. You're lulled right into its hands, where you just naturally go right there. So if you a filter or some other kind of a deterrent that you could build in and stop you before you fall is logical. The Chovas HaTalmidim is a sort of a contemporary Musar Sefer. It was written by the Piazetzner Rebbe, who was murdered by the Nazis in the Warsaw Ghetto. So he has a wonderful, helpful image. He says, you ever have that experience when your Yetzer Hara, it's not a question of if it will win, it's gonna win. Yeah, have that before. I mean, it's not really a struggle because it's decided you're gonna do what that particular Yetzer Hara is demanding right now. Okay, so picture one of those. So the Chovas HaTalmidim speaks to that, and he says, okay, right, that's not easy. What we can do is you could make a deal and you could say, you win, you got it in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, I'm going to do that thing, whatever that thing is. He points out, if you make the 5-minute deal, sometimes, not invariably, but sometimes, you actually don't feel like it 5 minutes later. Timing is of the essence, right? That's why on Pesach we have matzah, which is defined as bread without time, right? Without it's meant to teach us this, that sometimes time is a tool that we can use. It can work against us, it can work for us. If you don't give the Yetzer a chance to kick his foot in the door, you can win, right? Delay things, keep things at bay, and then suddenly you don't feel like it so much anymore. By the way, people talk about this trick when it comes to dieting, and a lot of people who I speak to swear by it. They say, no, have that extra thing, but wait 5 minutes. And a lot of the time the craving goes away. It was a spontaneous kind of an urge, and then the urge isn't there anymore. You say, I don't think I need that cookie, it's fine. But it works with a lot of other things. I'm going quickly and I'm doing all the talking. Does anybody want to ask or comment? Fine. Number 3.
Even if the person,
go ahead.
Even if the person after 5 minutes falls, he still gets the star of those 5 minutes, right?
Yeah, I think so too. Nice, Eitan. Very, very good point, right? In other words, you get credit for everything. So the very fact that at least you kind of kept your Yetzer at bay for 5 minutes, okay, well, that's big. That showed at least you're trying. I mean, compared to the guy who just totally gives in, yeah, whatever you want, Yetzer. Number three. In a contest between the genders, women do much better than men. When they don't have structure, they have it built in. That's why one of the explanations why women are not mechuyavos in the mitzvah Aseh Shezman Grama they're not obligated in the 7 time-bound mitzvahs like men, is because they have physiologically, they have an internal biological clock. It's certainly when they menstruate, when they're limited by child rearing. It means that Hashem has built a certain spirituality within them that's almost organic. It's natural. Women do better, and we see this historically in some famous episodes, without structure. When Moshe Rabbeinu was gone for longer than anybody calculated, they miscalculated, if you remember the Medrash, but he was gone, and the men didn't do well when they lacked that structure. Oh no, we can't, Cheta Egel, boom. The women didn't participate in that one. They said, no, we'll be fine. They did better. They do, in general, better in periods of darkness. Women stay strong. And men need many more boundaries. We need to be in the morning in Shachris. We need to find ourselves in the middle of the day, which is arguably the hardest time. Someplace find me a mincha. At the end of the day, I need to bookend it with a good Ma'ariv minyan, right? We get everything in very much in a structure. We're supposed to be learning Torah as much as we can, right? It gives meaning and structure in our days. Again, if we don't have this, we stay glued to whatever kinds of addictions we have for hours on end. The woman sets a boundary. It can be explained this way, that the women, the Jewish people descends by matrilineal descent through the mother. That's how we determine a person's religious status. And then only after there's a boundary set, does then afterwards the father then set the next boundaries. Are you a Cohen? Are you a Levi? Are you Israel? But the women are the ones who are the initial boundary setters. It's why in periods of great darkness, when there was some confusion about who would be the next step in the legacy, Sarah Imenu was the guiding voice. And Hashem told Avram, listen to Sarah. She's better at these things. She knows, she says this, you got to kick out Yishmael. You do what she says. She has a better sense of this. And the same was repeated in the next generation. Rivki Imenu knew exactly who the legacy should go with. Yitzchak was a little blindsided, literally, by Esav. And the women are better with these things. So we should follow their lead on these things. Number 4. This is now putting all this together and getting practical. Sit down, if you haven't already done so, if you're planning your life and trying to figure out how to lead a life of merit and meaning and structure and productivity. So sit down and make a list of everything that is currently messing up your life, or you anticipate might be a pitfall in the future, things that are challenges, both in terms of activities, in terms of personalities that are in your life, anything that could be a stumbling block, big or small. Once you have a good list in front of you, figure out what you need to do with each of these things. Some of the personalities are just there. They're not going to be easily avoided. They may be family members that just are, that's just the way it is. Okay, but you get to strategize. Give it some thought. Remember, almost every problem, Hashem sends us these problems, right? So almost every one of these items, with good, thoughtful contemplation. Sometimes you take advice, you ask shailas of Rebbis or of older brothers or mentors. You can figure out a lot of the problems. I mean, another way of looking at life, a lot of life is just basic problem solving. From morning to night, it's going through life problem solving. And our goal is to do it in a way that's going to make us, again, in charge and control. So make a list and be concrete about it. Right? What are your big decisions? What should you do? Should you go to college? You not go to college? You go to a class online? Should you come back to Eretz Yisrael? Who's a bad influence in your life? Are there any old friends that maybe you should reconsider? It's a tough one because, I don't generally advise people to just cut off old friends unless they're of the other gender. But even then, you just, I think a more naturalistic kind of way of dealing with it is just let things drift. But be proactive about this. The lashon of the Mishnah says, "Knei lecha chaver You should acquire for yourself a friend, meaning you shouldn't just fall into friendships of convenience, especially if they're of the toxic nature. You should do your best to try to, see, well, which people are actually virtuous and belong in my life and which should be avoided. And try to be rigorous on that one. Your friends and your family, you can't choose your family, but you can choose how much involvement you're going to have with your family. One of my students has a terrible family situation, and I said, you should call your parents. You should be attentive. Doesn't mean you have to go into their home. And if being in home is a bad setup for you, it's conducive to all kinds of retrograde kind of behaviors. So don't go. You don't have an obligation to go when it's going to bring you down spiritually. Here's some other areas you might want to figure out. We could talk about any of these if anybody wants to bring it up. What's your policy by the internet? On your phone, what do? Do you have a filter? Right. I mentioned one of you even graciously volunteered to sponsor a filter for one of my students who still, I don't want to pressure him too much. He still hasn't gotten his act together, so this may take some time. But do you have filters? What are the filters? If you have a filter, is it adequate? There are different companies. Do you have this now? I'm aware increasingly there's a device that tracks, we were talking about this, no? Somebody was talking about it recently, that tracks your time online. What's it called?
It's just the built-in settings for most Apple devices.
Yeah.
Oh, it's already an automatic, and it just tells you how long you've been on. Isn't it depressing when you see how much time you've clocked? Okay, so that's good. Maybe, web chaver is the concept where you have a friend and you monitor him and he monitors you, and just that, basic social embarrassment, as I used to use that as restraint, is really good. What is your policy with regards to girls? I'm not telling you what it should be. That's going to be individual, but that's something at least you should be able to say, this is what I do and this is what I don't do. What's your policy? Yeah.
I married one. Only one.
That was really good idea. You should talk to her a lot, and you can even look at her, Ari.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Tell
but
her I
not
said
too
so.
much, right? You can't talk to her too much. That's in Pirkei Avos.
Yeah, that's true. But it's talking about sicha as in like shtus.
Yeah.
With Ari and Mrs. Swift, it's all divrei kedusha.
Yeah, we'll go with that. Definitely not lots and lots of bad puns.
That's not fair.
No, not you guys.
Why does Ari have a heter to talk to girls?
I only have a heter to talk to one girl.
Girl in the singular.
A girl, I think.
Maybe in the plural if they're family members.
Trust me, she's not okay with me.
We do. Another question, what do you do about movies? Don't answer. For people who find it's like way too much, way too radical to go with that altogether, they grew up, they're addicted to those things. Well, okay, fine. So you're going to not cut them out of your life. Are all movies okay? Do you have any restrictions? What are your rules? What do you permit yourself to see? Well, that's all the question. A lot of people don't even consider these questions. They just watch whatever they watch. Whatever comes, because it's free society, free world. It's not the Jewish approach. It should be more rigorous, more proactive. What do you do about drugs, about smoking, about vaping? There's a movement now in Israel recognizing to take care of ourselves. It's an obligation. It's a Torah commandment. Shmor nafshecha, right? So with the clear correlation between smokers who are much more at risk for corona and corona-related conditions. So there's a movement now afoot in Israel, of all places, where there's a lot of smoking here, very, very entrenched in the society. They try to stop, even cigarettes, and certainly other things. Drug use also, any foreign substance you put into your lungs, you ever see pictures of the lungs? They're awfully delicate little things going on in there, right? They're fragile, handle with care. Putting all kinds of substances in there. Oh, Rabbi, it's fine. It's marijuana. They've proven, research shows it's totally benign. Yeah, we were talking before about the beauty of people's ability to rationalize. Yeah, so these are things that you should think through. What are your policies? Are these things that are necessary in your life? Maybe they are. I don't mean as a rhetorical question. Maybe you need them, maybe you don't. Decide the rules. You can always renegotiate them later, meaning your decisions are now basic policy, but if they don't work, you have to rethink them. Yeah, I have something important to add to this, but that's coming up. You should have a few absolute red lines. They're individual. You have to figure them out for yourself. And those chok v'lo yabor you can't cross. And then you should be more moderate on certain things too, especially if you don't feel that they're particularly damaging or dangerous for your neshama. This is all within number 4, but it's a crucial idea. Do not be too hard on yourself. Remember, another trick, classic trick of the Yetzer Hara, is to set the goals just a bit too high enough that we fail. And then we go into, remember this concept, Yeush, we go into despair mode, and then the Yetzer Hara's got us. Okay, it's all hopeless anyway, let me go have fun, right? So set realistic goals. You could in some kind of a reasonable way, I could do this, and then do it. Number 5, unless there are questions.
Yeah, just to add to that, Rabbi, I think that your last point is super important, especially for today's generation, which like people like at small things like, okay, it's over, I'm gonna fall into depression. So I think it's very, very important people don't get too down on themselves and set very small goals. I think that's really, really important. People like to set lofty goals, even just mediocre goals. I think people should start very, very small.
Yeah.
Personally.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, I mean, these are points I do feel it's worth quoting the Ramchal. He says a lot of these things are not new to you. We need to review these things. We need to go over them and reinforce ourselves and strengthen ourselves as much as we can. We're not all that good about a lot of these things. Number 5, it is imperative. It's a Torah obligation. It's not, but I just made that up. But you'll hear why I'm coming down strong. You must be good to yourself. You have to plan something fun, and there has to be some kind of an outlet. By the way, I don't know if this is necessary in previous generations as much, but you have to take care of yourself. And it sounds like I'm joking. I'm really not. I'm really not joking. You have to do good stuff because we have today something I don't think anybody's had quite like our generation. There is a FOMO. There is a fear of missing out. A sense today that because everything seems available, there are social media outlets for just about every kind of human deranged deviant kind of behavior. If you want it, you got it. And there's a support group for you to boot. That knowledge itself is poison because it gives us the sense that we're the noble, pure minority. Everybody else is having a good old time out there, and I'm kicking back inside, being all good. Maybe I'm missing out. Maybe they're right and I'm wrong. You ever had that feeling? Right? So you got to take care of yourself. You got to feed your Yetzer Hara. You have to say, no, it's a sweet world. It's a good world. I know that the poskim today, for example, are very strong on this in ways that I don't think they were before, that women, for example, really look attractive for their husbands. That's something that modern generations emphasize more so than you see in the classic poskim. But it makes sense. I mean, you walk out in the street, there are billboards everywhere. There are women dressed immodestly everywhere. And there's so much vying for the man's attention. And his Yetzer Hara is absolutely, it's overstimulated. And so we need to compensate. So the wife should look extra beautiful and do her part to try to help strengthen us, right? And that's an example of find kosher fun, find ways of doing things that's something that you can look forward to. That's a reward. You push yourself in one area, okay, you get a treat, much like you would do that for your animal. Helpful piece in the Cheshbon Nefesh, one of the popular Musar Sfarim. He says, like if you want your dog to go to its place, the first couple times that it does, give it a biscuit, give it a treat, and pet it. Good boy, good boy. So we are our own little animals that we're training. So take care of it. And the Cheshbon Nefesh cautions you, if you push it too much, like we said at the end of the point number 4, if you push it too much, your inner animal could turn on you and bite you. as animals that have been trained too rigorously have been known to do to their owners. Number 6, if you've really rewarded yourself and taken care of yourself, so then be strong in the other areas. You don't really have an excuse at this point. You're okay, you're happy, you got whatever, you filled in your blanks, you have the things you want. Okay. So the other areas, those should be strong. There really isn't an excuse for batala. Every minute of your day should be structured. And by structured, I'm saying, ideally you'll be learning Torah 24/7. That's what Chazal say is an ideal Jew. But Rambam says exercise is good. And today people have other things that they feel they need to do. Fine. You want to do some chesed, wonderful. You want to do other kinds of mitzvahs, by all means. Work hard and play hard. Don't leave any time for downtime. Keep going. Keep pushing. And I don't think it should be any different. There's plenty of meaningful activities that can be done, even indoors, even when you're, in relative seclusion, as many of us are these days. That doesn't really stop us from being able to be structured. 7. Okay, how do you do this? How do you stay busy? So actually think through a day. Think through a structure. Set goals, concrete goals and boundaries. What are your rules for davening? Do you daven 3 times a day, with a minyan, without a minyan? What are your restrictions? Do you one of those guys who comes in late, leaves early because davening is actually a burden on you? How do you do that? How much learning? Do you have chovos? I think a lot of you know me pretty well, and I always talk about this. It's not an original idea at all, but chovos, absolutely guide my days every day. I'm behind today, so I'm going to be staying up a little later than usual then do all my chovos. I was guiding Yafo, and I went to yeshiva, and then I'm teaching, and like this. Okay, so I have to do my chovos, but you have to define them. You have to have very clear obligations. If you can't find, here's some ideas of meaningful activities. Help your parents. Go and, if you're living at home, ask your mom if she needs the house painted. Ask your friends, ask poor people, right? Do some gardening outside, right? Do the menschy things, right? Wash the car, do the dishes, offer to babysit your sister. If she has, if she has little kids at home. Show that if you did, they said they complain you went to yeshiva and you flipped out. Show that what that really means, becoming more religious, means you're an overall mensch. Learn right after Shachris. Post can bring down, that's a good thing to do. Again, don't push yourself too hard, but don't go too easy either. Try to find a good balance. If the big question, of course, on this, something that many of us have talked about, but just to reinforce it, how do you know what the right balance is? How do you know that you're pushing but not too hard, but then enough? So you test it, like almost anything else. Is the pan hot enough? Is it not hot enough? You test it. If you hear of a new idea that you should be applying in your life, and you have a really extreme emotional negative reaction to it, I can't do that. Well, pay attention to that. And maybe you can't, or maybe you can't do the full thing. Other things you hear for the first time and you think, yeah, I can do that. That's no big deal. And take it right on. I had a student who heard me give the shir on Baal Sechanim, that some of the poskim questioned the relevance of having posters of sports heroes and movie stars on their walls. And he went right back to his dorm room and tore them all down. So, if that's you, if you could do that, great. If that would leave you traumatized, because now you don't have, I was going to say Magic Johnson, but I know that really date me.
LeBron, Kobe.
LeBron. How come my students, all they talk about is some family named Kardashian?
Rabbi, whoever taught
I
Kardashian,
don't want to know. I'm just kidding.
Your students are talking
Anyway,
about that. Rabbi,
I'm saying if you can put things into practice right away, that's optimal. Okay. It's like seasoning food. add a little salt, not too much, add more spice. Number 8, learn Musar every day, right? Have these kinds of discussions. This is Musar. This year's Musar. Bring out, highlight the things you need to be talking about. Do it around a good classic sefer like Mesilas Yesharim or Chovos Levavos or the many, many other classic Musar books. Find something you're naturally drawn to. Stay consistent. Do it every day, 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. Have chavrusas so that you can call each other out on your blind spots. Also, the advantage of a chavrusa, who you set a time with, is then you have to go, because then if you're not there, you let them down. Go to classes. Find things that are sweet. Remember the Gemara in Avodah Zarah quotes Rabbi is saying, "Ein adam lomed Torah ela mimakom shelibo chafetz." A person only learns Torah in a place where his heart desires. Find those things that your heart desires. Can I go a couple minutes overtime to finish this shir tonight? Yep. Great. Number 9. I don't know if anybody's heard this here. There's halacha in Hilchos Deos. Anybody? Everybody?
Oh, Hilchos Deos.
Halacha, Aleph and Beis. Surround yourself with good people or find yourself a cave.
Could you all sound a little bit more like the Manchurian Candidate? Remember I said that thing? Like they all kind of did it automatically? Yeah. Find yourself, surround yourself with good, likewise people. If everybody in your life was doing everything we just described, it'd be so much easier if you did it. I know that's not always so easy nowadays. Our circumstances are determined by other factors who we get to hang around with, family and otherwise. But as much as you can, hang out with the right crowd. Number 10. Let's say you go through a period, a vacation, a quarantine, a period in your life that was like this. When you finish it, don't just move on to the next stage. It's critical. You have to go then and look at that whole experience and do a deep cheshbon nefesh. How'd that work exactly? What was good? What was bad? Right? In which areas did you surprise yourself at how strong you were? And take a lesson from yourself, because we're all works in progress. We're all figuring it out all along at every stage in life. You never get perfect at any of these things, right? Where did you fail? Learn from your weaknesses. Failure is great. It's what makes a man a mensch, because you learn from your weaknesses. Emphasize your strengths. Don't be too hard on yourself. We have a tendency of being more negative than positive in general. Remember, we're always learning, always growing. Hashem rewards us for our efforts. Very much what Eitan's insight was. Even if you pushed off the Yetzer Hara those 5 minutes, but that was still 5 minutes, you get schar for our hishtadlus. Anybody wants, it's on topic. For years ago, I put together this guide called the Post Yeshiva Survival Guide, very much with these questions in mind. It's a think piece, flawed. It's 22 years old already, but it might have something of meaning. I'm happy to send it to anybody who doesn't have it. Questions, thoughts? Okay, great. I will hang out, and I'll see you tomorrow night, or tomorrow afternoon will be your time.
See you, everyone.
Thank you, Eddie.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, pleasure.
Let's say someone sets up like a program where they incentivize themselves not to do a certain thing, and because of that incentive, like do you still get rewarded, like if you hold off for like another week or two?
Yeah, you get rewarded for everything, every little detail, every effort you make, and we make a mistake of being overly perfectionist, because if we somehow don't do everything, we've done nothing. That's a mistake. No, you've done something. That's good.
Okay.
And especially if you can look back later and learn from it and say, okay, this is a building block, and I'll get stronger eventually. I'll get better at this. Shem doesn't expect overnight perfection.
Okay.
Rabbi, I have a topic request, and this is gonna be like on par with like Breslov. There's controversial, for lack of a word, Sephardi rabbis to like do a lot more fire and brimstone. I was wondering if that could be like a topic.
Yeah, I'm happy to. It's come up a lot in the last couple of years. I guess because the last couple of years there've been a bunch of them
Right.
that they've come out. So I have what to say on the subject. Good. Happy to. I do have some of my own fire and brimstone about the people who are full of fire and brimstone. Yeah, great. I will. I also, I mean, among other things, there was a complicated case with a certain notable rabbi whose name I'll mention when we get to it. I have no reason to say it right now, who was subject to public censure by a bunch of other rabbis. Some of them themselves, the fact that they were on the list, they have their own problems. So I'm not sure what they're doing publicly criticizing him. But the comments had some merit and something worthy. I'll give you this as just initial response, but I'm happy to do the topic, and probably I should develop it as a proper file, which I don't yet. I just have my own thoughts. No, that's not true. I have some material. I have some information on file. But keep in mind, a gadol is a gadol because of actual merits. Did not necessarily get to his position of gadolus because he won a popularity contest or has the most hits on YouTube. People make that mistake. They think, well, he's big. How do you know he's big? Well, everybody watches his shirim, and he's so popular. I'm sorry, how do you know that he's big? Are those criteria? Have those ever been criteria for Klal Yisrael? There are a lot of popular shysters. Yeah, anyway, good topic, thanks. Anything else? Yeah.
Could I ask a question after private answer?
Your audio is not so loud.
Might be something blocking your camera or your microphone.
Could I ask Rabbi a private answer for just a minute or two after?
We could leave
Yeah,
now. I don't think any of us have any more questions.
But if anybody had something, by all means, now's fine. Shmuel and I can wait a bit if you had something.
Yeah, I have a question. Just tell me if it's too big. It's kind of like a more psychological question. Maybe from that background you could answer it.
I'm listening.
Cool. I'm sorry if you hear something in the background. My mom's cooking. But my question is, what do you think the Yitzhahara for sports is, and if it's better than a lot of things? Because it's an interesting thing for me to understand why people are drawn to that. And to me, on the surface, it doesn't seem as damaging as other things. Just what's your opinion on that? In just like 2 minutes, if you could.
Sure, I'll try to do it briefly. It is a longer discussion, but yeah. It can be simple. I mean, people like games. You know, there's something about there's something satisfying in a known entity that has clear rules. You get into those rules, you get into the structure, and then there's an outcome that's satisfying. And going through that whole process becomes a ritual that is gratifying, and that's kind of benign. And especially if, as in some of the sports, there's certain positive virtues, team spirit, decency, treating the other players with respect, and the like. Then actually, sports could be used as a nice way of teaching kids to be mensches and such. The negative side is also going to be sort of obvious. It's often many of the sports are conducive to violence. It taps into some kind of primal urge, especially in men, to be really violent and dominant on the field or in some kind of, or in a hand-to-hand combat kind of a wrestling or boxing kind of a dynamic. Rav Avadia is among the poskim who mentions that boxing may be a problem of tsar balei chaim. Can't torture animals, and you can't torture people either, because they're animals. I mean, they're living beings too. Balei chaim means people who have life, creatures who have life. Well, that's people too. There's another dynamic of sports. This is a negative, and that is, it's not exactly your question, but it has to be said, and that is that they represent a colossal waste of time, talent, and resources. If Rabbi Gottlieb imagines that if Martians were to come down and watch our behavior and they'd see a bunch of grown men behaving like children, they would look curiously at us, saying, what's that? all these otherwise intelligent people behaving like adolescents. So those are just a few of the factors that come to mind. Most of it's a waste of time. The first part, I think, has some virtue. You know, there's some things to be found. I sometimes think that the virtues are overplayed, and they're used as rationalizations. Rabbi Schiller, the Rosh Yeshiva of Or Sameach, had a baseball past, and so he likes to draw on baseball as a way of teaching kind of values in Torah. I know the same is true. There's a famous rabbi, I think he's retired now, and from Atlanta, Rabbi Feldman, who writes about baseball too. And baseball, I think, is one of those sports that you can really see some of the virtues, but I think they push too much. You know, it's a lot of wasted time too.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, great. I'll see you tomorrow, B'ezras Hashem.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Yes,
Rabbi.
sir.
Jeffrey's
Shmuel, I'm
got Homer.
Thank you, Rabbi.
here.
Al Tosef.
Right?
Yeah. It's my favorite.